How did diplomacy die? Can anything bring it back? Let's look first at the historical and then the cultural context. We all know that the fall of the Soviet Union marked a major turning point in history after nearly half a century of Cold War. It ushered in the unipolar world, an order that lasted for most of the next 3 decades. During that time, thanks especially to the unassailable position of its currency, the United States dominated the planet's economic activity and had an active hand in many of its most significant political events. Not all of these efforts were successful. Some were even dismal failures. International relations guru John Mearsheimer cites 2017 as the moment when the unipolar world, theoretically under the watchful control of the US, gave way to a new multipolar world that is still taking and changing shape. One notion closely associated with the unipolar world is the oft-repeated idea of a rules-based order. Although seemingly of universal significance, that order functioned as a set of behavioral standards defined and enforced by the unique superpower, the United States. Such a system has at least one significant advantage. The presence of a unipolar hegemon simplified the reasoning applied to the complexity of international relations. The meaning of freedom in the free world now seemed obvious. Nations were now free to align with the policies of Washington, knowing that it would put them on the right side of unipolar history. Some people like to call this a normative order. Could that belief and its prevalence help to explain an unfortunate trend, the marginalization of the very notion of diplomacy? Even if the idea of a normative order carries a lot of positive connotations, one of the effects of that trend has been the decline of diplomacy and even the discrediting of the value of dialogue. When you have a normative order you can conveniently refer to, you can easily cut short any discussion by appealing to the rules of the normative order. This will close off not just the debate, but the possibility of any kind of constructive reflection that might deviate from the rule. We like to say that every rule has exceptions, but in reality, every rule is valid only within its field of application. If you attempt to apply it elsewhere, where disparate factors introduce new facets of problems and conflicts, the simple rule that has always proved so convenient will not only fail to solve the problem, it will most likely aggravate the effects. The gap between a supposed norm and the reality we have to deal with in the real world should help us to understand our frustration with a pattern of forever wars, uncontrollable migration, and more recently, with ceasefires that we clamor for but are never put into practice. This has become truly a cultural phenomenon. We continue to believe that there is a reasonable set of rules that can guide us, but comforted by this idea, we stop thinking about what those rules mean and lose any sense of how to apply them. To sum up, the history of the past 35 years, the unipolar moment, offered us the hope of living under a normative order that has never managed to exist except in our discourse. But if we wanted to be serious about it, we might have noticed a deeper reason that explains why a stable, normative order could never exist. We have crafted a society whose order relies on rules rather than social interaction. Both our national and individual destinies have been transformed by the logic of Madison Avenue. The practice of constructive collaboration that is found at the core of every healthy society has been replaced by a focus on competitive advantage. Even more significantly, self-promotional monologue has supplanted dialogue. We see it in our daily lives, but on a global scale, it has also led to the death of diplomacy. In this year of multiple elections, with the most monumental one expected in November, is there any real chance of seeing a new world order built not of normativity, but of dialogue, and therefore understanding, an understanding built out of the appreciation of diversity, complexity, and the complementarity of interests rather than the clash of ambitions? Some of us still cling to that hope, but the forces lined up against it are truly formidable. Must things get worse before they can even attempt to get better? Is that why we have never felt so close to the brink of a new world war?
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.